So, welcome everyone to the Woodstock Housing Committee meeting for November. Tonight we are presenting the findings of the Stage 2 report from Fisher Associates, an engineering and architectural firm that the town hired to evaluate town-owned lands for affordable housing. At the end of the meeting, we'll open it up for a public be heard. Please also feel free to put comments in the chat. We'll keep track of them and do our best to respond either tonight or in a newsletter follow-up. And we're aiming to end this meeting by 6:30 tonight. So the Woodstock Housing Committee is a group of dedicated volunteers who are trying to find solutions to the housing crisis in our town. I'm Catherine Teagan, and you'll see the Housing Committee members listed here. We are fortunate to have Kai Lord Farmer from the Ulster County Planning Department as our advisor, and Kai is with us tonight. Thank you, Kai. The Housing Committee was formed in response to the housing need identified in the comprehensive plan that was adopted by the town in 2018. The comprehensive plan highlighted the need for more housing to keep our town economically viable and diverse. The housing issues have only grown more severe since 2018. During the pandemic, there was also an influx of residents who realized that Woodstock is a highly desirable place to live. One solution to the housing crisis is to build more housing that will be available at below market rates. This is the driving force behind the initiative we are discussing tonight. 3 years ago, the Housing Committee embarked on the Town-Owned Lands Initiative. We knew that constructing affordable housing was financially challenging and that we needed to figure out how new housing projects come together. Understanding the financial constraints is crucial to developing housing. Our research showed us that affordable housing projects are funded by developers through a combination of federal, state, and local government subsidies, private investment, and other incentives. Common funding sources include the federal low-income housing tax credit, grants and loans from New York State funds, and grants from local funds such as the Ulster County Housing Action Fund. Developers also use loans from banks and their own capital. We realized there was a way that the town can be additive in this financial equation, and that is donate town-owned land. The free land is a big factor in making these projects work. Another way the town can contribute is by creating a community housing fund, which is something the Housing Committee will be looking at more next year. We are also currently working on putting together a panel of developers who will speak to the financial, engineering, sustainability, and design issues involved in building housing. More on this later. So we started the Town and Parcels project by evaluating each of the 34 properties owned by the town. The Housing Committee worked in conjunction with the Planning Department of Ulster County. After identifying the 5 most feasible parcels listed on this slide, the town issued an RFP, a request for proposals, in October 2024. The RFP asked engineering and architectural firms to evaluate the suitability of the 5 parcels for building affordable housing. The town hired Fisher Associates in December of last year. The fees are being covered by the American Rescue Plan Act funds from the federal government that Woodstock received, and Fisher began work in January of this year. We structured the work with Fisher in 3 stages. Each stage explores a different level of viability. Stage 1 included an initial overview of the 5 parcels, including site characteristics, zoning designations, environmental screenings, and water and sewer access information. The Stage 1 report was delivered on February 14th of this year. Based on the Stage 1 report, the Housing Committee recommended that the 5 properties be narrowed down to 3, the 3-mile parcel, Sena Highwoods, and the Mountain View parking lot. The Stage 2 report delivered on October 21st digs deeper into the analysis of the 3 parcels, with summaries of site visits to survey environmental and geological conditions that will impact the construction of housing. Stage 3 will focus on hypothetical plans for 1 or 2 of the parcels once we narrow down the choices in Stage 2. For stage 3, Fisher will do site development plans that will offer design concepts, including illustrated plans and estimated costs. These visuals will help us begin to understand what could be possible for housing on these sites. I just have to admit a few more people, sorry. Okay. So to create the stage 2 report, Fisher conducted site visits to analyze plant communities, studies of hazardous materials, and wetlands delineation surveys. Hold on, one more person here. The stage 2 report also includes details on engineering aspects, including site geology, tree clearing, drainage, utility connections, and buildable areas. As part of stage 2, the required phase 1 environmental site assessments, or ESA reports, were compiled by Fisher for each parcel. The ESA reports are lengthy documents, about 150 pages each, that summarize recognized environmental conditions, historic recognized environmental conditions, wetlands, and protected natural resources. These will be posted on the town website along with the stage 2 report. A major finding of the stage 2 report is that the phase 1 environmental assessments showed that no potential environmental risks or contaminants are present on the 3 sites, specifically in the buildable areas. If you have questions about any of the specifics in the phase 1 ESA reports, please write us at housing@woodstocknewyork.org and we will pass them along to Fisher. Our task now is to choose 2 parcels out of the 3 studied to investigate in stage 3, which will include architectural renderings of possible designs for affordable housing. We wanted to emphasize now that we are not currently making a decision to build housing on any particular parcel. We are continuing to study the potential for these sites. Now we'll be taking a look at the pros and cons for each site in the next part of the presentation. Committee members Gregory Stanford, Anna Womack, and Rebecca Brooks will summarize the findings for each parcel. And then my co-chair, John Huber, will discuss parking and next steps, and Rebecca will finish up with community engagement. Gregory?
Great. So you ready for me? Okay, so hello everybody. I'm here to go over the 3-mile parcel. So this site is 31 acres. This is at the bottom end of Xena Road, sort of at the tippy bottom of Woodstock, and Route 28 is just around the corner. So if you look at this, you could see the diagram shows us really what's happening in the site in terms of where we can build, where there are wetlands, and where there are slopes. So as we said, it's residentially zoned, and Fisher's report for this site said it could accommodate up to 50 units. And when we say 50 units, that's the buildable area. So that's the area within the yellow line that sort of curves around. Thank you, Rebecca. So sort of meanders around the front portion of the site, which is about 6 acres. So you can see that there. A couple of other features about this site are to the south and the east of the site is New York State lands that extends down to the Blue Forest. So that's that. One of the things that a couple other things to know about the site is because it's not near the village, it doesn't have town water or town sewage. So it would need its own septic system and its own well. So let's go to the next page. So the pro, of course, is that in the area that's outlined by our engineers, there are no recognizable environmental concerns for building on that particular site. So we're not affecting the wetlands and the species, etc. So let's look at a bit of a longer list, which is the cons. There you go. Okay, let me get my notes on this. Ready? Okay, so as we mentioned, extensive wetlands. So really, that pretty much bifurcates the site in half right away and then narrows it down to 6 acres that can be built on. There is, even for the area that we're going to be building on, there's going to be significant tree clearance required. In that area, for anyone that's hiked around the Blue Forest, there's a lot of shallow bedrock that will increase the cost of septic infrastructure and installation. So more drilling, more excavation, and infill to build roads, and et cetera. No direct public access to the site, but just about a 5-minute walk down to the corner of 28 and Xena, you can catch the UCAT bus. And for those of you who don't know, the UCAT Z goes to the east to Kingston Plaza and to the west of Pine Hill, that going through the village of Woodstock. Again, topographic conditions, that means the hills and the wetlands, discourages compact development. So what that means is, based on the diagram, if you go back to the diagram, Rebecca, we're not talking about a flat piece of land here where we get just two linear buildings and a straight road. So just the fact that the site meanders and there have to be buildings placed in different locations is definitely going to be adding cost to the overall project. One access point, go back to that diagram, please. Yeah. So one access to the point to the site. So that means that, there isn't any other access because that site only has road access at one point. In the zoning for the town, a site that has 100 units or more needs two access points for emergency, but we suspect that this might also require two access points. So we'd find out more about that later on if we ever decided to go forward with the site. And what else have we got here? One of the issues is because the site slopes down toward the Blue Forest, that creates a condition of a lot of erosion because you've got the watershed coming down. So that would also increase costs because it would require more storm management. So prohibitive cost of development given rock and uneven terrain, which we pretty much went over. So that's the cons. That's all I've got. Catherine, you're muted.
Okay, hi everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Hi everybody, so my name is Anna. I'm here to talk about the second parcel, which is Xena Highwoods. So it is our second parcel under consideration for moving forward to stage 3. To begin with some basics to describe the site, Xena Highwoods has 11.1 acres with woods on former farmland. Fisher's report states that this was most likely over 100 years ago. It is zoned for residential use. Xena Highwoods is a corner lot, and so therefore it has 2 front yards. Site access is amenable with access points on Xena Highwoods Road as well as Lauren Court. You can see that if you look closely on the diagram, although I know it is a little small. Grading would be necessary here, as well as the installation of a culvert, but site access overall in this capacity is still very good. The property itself, for the report, would require stormwater management, though areas of standing water during the water months doesn't necessarily impact the entirety of the buildable area. And again, on this diagram, you can see that our buildable area is outlined in yellow here. And the water does drain to the southernmost parts of the property below that yellow line for the buildable area. As you can see, our buildable area is on the northernmost part of the property. We also have a primer with a glossary that we'll be giving folks. And so at that point, I would guide folks to that glossary. The report does use terms like hummocks and hollows and provides deeper information on soil quality and the exact type of landscape and bedrock qualities that are identified. The open space requirement for this parcel is 70% or approximately 7.77 acres. Please do remember, Rebecca, if you want to go back to that first slide real quick. At this point, any estimate on the number of units that can be built on the site is an estimate, and it is an approximation. So it says that the site could accommodate up to 40 units. That's a guesstimate. Any build that may or may not happen is dependent on multiple factors, and it's still informational rather than any larger decision-making happening at this point. So we will continue to look at the parcels creatively, but it is a guess, and that's still important to provide information to you about. So Rebecca, if you want to go back to the other slide, if you look at the diagram, you will see delineated areas that do require grading and other important markers and aspects of the property, including slope. As mentioned before, you can see the buildable area. The slope on the property is pretty significant, which is why Fisher designated the buildable area to the northernmost part of the property. The slope mostly is right outside of that area, right underneath on the southern edge. So Rebecca, if you want to go to the next slide. For positives regarding the Xena Highwoods parcel, there are no recognized areas of concern in the buildable area, which is great. In the report, you will see identified threatened species that live on the property, such as several bat species and monarch butterflies. Just to say that that remains an important consideration, of course, and there are creative and workable solutions. You will also see mention of a critical environmental areas in the report, but again, these are primarily outside of the outlined buildable area. The buildable area of the property is also relatively flat, despite sloping on other parts of the property. So that's good because the part that we can build on and build those units on is flat. So it's amenable to building. And as mentioned, having access to 2 streets will enable efficient vehicle circulation on the site for any potential build. We can go on to the next slide. So moving on to cons for the Xena Highwoods parcel. Currently, there is no water or septic on the location. So you'll see on the slide further down that the property also has shallow bedrock. In the report, Fisher identified the bedrock as being 1.5 feet below ground surface. This means that well drilling could be as deep as 140 to 550 feet potentially, and would increase the cost for septic installation and its infrastructure. Tree clearing would also be needed for the site. While we did our physical site reviews as a committee, we also identified that there were a lot of young trees on the property, but Fisher also recognized that there was not an insignificant amount of unhealthy trees that would require clearing and management. The parcel would likely also require additional review and approval by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as a seeker review, which is the state environmental quality review for the above mentioned reasons and for the environmental factors primarily outside of the identified buildable area. Though again, as mentioned before, conservation and sustainability have been and are clearly identified community priorities, and they are important considerations. Lastly, the site has no local transit, and overall cost of development would be moderately expensive despite possible creative measures and or out-of-the-box thinking that we might be able to utilize. And so that is Xena Highwoods.
Thank you, Anna. I'll take the next one. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I'll be presenting on the Mountain View parking lot, which is the 3rd parcel in review. It is located, as probably everyone knows, off of Rock City Road across from Colony. It is 2.5 acres and is already zoned residential. According to the Fisher study, the site could accommodate up to 36 housing units while potentially still retaining some public parking. We'll zoom in a little bit more here and go into more detail. So the natural features of this site are also very manageable. There is a stream that runs along the eastern edge and wetland area toward the south, but these are all well outside the main buildable area. The lot is mostly gravel surface with a small paved section. As far as some of the pros of this site, there are quite a few advantages. For one, there were also no recognized environmental concerns in the buildable areas. The terrain is relatively flat with essentially no trees that would need to be removed. The location is prime. It's walkable to shops, services, transit, which would make it highly desirable for any resident who would want to live or work in town without heavy reliance on a car. As mentioned, there are transit options available, as we all know, UCAT, as well as trailways. This all we believe contributes to a goal for a more connected community. The lot, another advantage, is already served by municipal water and sewer, which is one of many reasons why, from a cost and infrastructure standpoint, the Mountain View lot is one of the more feasible, straightforward, and cost-effective sites in consideration for development of housing. Now, for the cons, as we all know, this is currently the home of the farmers market, and so that would necessitate its relocation. We've started a dialogue with that group about this scenario, and we'll keep in touch with them. Now, the largest trade-off here is going to be parking. The lot currently holds upwards of 100, 120 spaces maybe, but even in its current state, it's not optimally striped. So redevelopment could actually include a redesigned, better organized lot that might help offset some of the loss. Plus, we believe the town could explore promoting additional parking areas nearby. Now, overall, Mountain View stands out for its central location, existing infrastructure, and cost effectiveness. But knowing how big an issue parking is for residents in the town, the Housing Committee took it upon ourselves to explore this issue further this year so that we could fully assess it and try to strike the right balance between all the needs of our community. So, in that vein, I am now going to turn it over to John to talk a little bit more about some of the parking issues associated with this parcel choice.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm John. Since we presented the stage 1 report to town in the beginning of this year, knew that this was going to be the biggest issue with the Mountain View lot, the loss of parking. We know that the town relies on people to come to the businesses and to the music venues and to the galleries and to the restaurants. And if they don't have a place to park, it would not be good. So that we think is the biggest issue with the Mountain View lot. But we also think it's an issue that no one really understands as far as we know. There hasn't been good data on how bad the parking situation is. And so as a committee, we undertook over the past summer, starting at Memorial Day and ending in Labor Day, to count the cars or to count the spaces. And what we did was we started on weekend days to go and count the spaces, trying to identify what's the busiest time of day. And we also talked to the woman who takes the money at the Rock City Road lot and got her opinion on when it's the busiest, and decided that peak time is basically early afternoon to mid-afternoon on a weekend. And so we started counting cars, usually twice a day. Sometimes we only had volunteers for once a day. But I think we got all but one day through the summer on a weekend to count the cars. And we focused on the central lots, Lower Como, Rock City Road, the Pay lot, and then, of course, Mountain View. We also collected a lot of data on Upper Como, but we're not going to really talk about that because it's not really a central park that's used by business right now, but just wanted to keep in mind that our data show that's a pretty empty place unless there's special events there. So I'm going to show you two graphs about what we found from this exercise. In this one, we've just taken averages on each day, the Saturdays or the Sundays, and we've broken it down by the parking lot. So if you look at the far left graph, the Lower Cuomo graph on Saturdays, that's a lot that has 50 spots, and the red spots are the average in use, and the blue blocks are the average available. And so you can see on an average Saturday for Lower Cuomo lot that there was about 30 spots taken and about 20 spots available. And so if you move one bar over, that's the Mountain View lot on Saturdays. And again, it's about 130 spots in this case, and around maybe 45 on average are available and the rest are taken. And a larger proportion are taken in the Rock City Road lot. And then you can go to the 3 bars on the right and you can see on Sundays the same information. Two things that I think are worth seeing in this graph are that Saturdays are busier than Sundays by a bit. That is, the blue spots are a little lower on Saturday, the blue blocks of the bars. But more importantly, that there seems to be a lot of spots available if you add up all of the blue on any given day. And so if you go to the next slide, we've broken it down by day. And just think about the sort of purple bluish line first. So it goes from May 24th till September 7th, and each dot is now the total parking spots available, adding together all 3 lots. So on May 24th, there was approximately, we're just guessing by the location of that bar, 90 spots available. And on May 25th, there was a couple fewer, maybe 85. And so you can follow the blue line across and see how many spots were available at any given moment of a busy weekend day on each day. And a couple things that are clear to us from this are it's very rare to have a parking crunch. I mean, on a lot of these days, there's over 100 spots available. On most days, there's over 50 spots available. The only real parking crunch all summer occurred on June 8th, which was the Pride Day parade, and then essentially all the lots were full. But other than that, there were spots available with our current parking space, spaces on those 3 lots. So what if you took away spots from Mountain View and used it for housing? It's important to remember that we're not looking at taking up the whole parking lot, that there could still be room for housing in the parking lot after we would build housing there. And so the red line imagines what we would do if we took away half the spots from Mountain View. So that's 65 of the 130. So that red dashed line is essentially just taking away 30 spots from the blue line dot above it, taking away 65 spots from the blue line above it. And now as you go across, you can see again, there was a big shortage on June 8th, but there was also a shortage on June 5th and June 12th. And then there was quite a bit of shortage in August. And so there was, by our count, 11 days on weekends out of 30, which there would have been a genuine parking crunch had 65 spots disappeared from Mountain View. Although in the vast majority of days, the other 2/3, you're still okay even taking 65 spots away. And so what do we make of this? So one is that genuine parking crunches are now quite rare. We see all of this traffic in town, and we might imagine that no one can find a spot to park, but it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. And on average, there's over 100 spots available at the busiest time on the weekends, and only one day where the lots were full. But losing half the spaces in Mountain View would create a parking crunch 11 out of the 30 summer days, and these are especially in August. But we think there's something that you could do about that to offset any lost parking in Mountain View. One easy possibility is to restripe the lots. You can get more spots out of Rock City Road, and you could definitely get more out of Lower Cuomo, which doesn't have any stripes at all and has very haphazard parking. You could also add spots. This is true at Lower Cuomo. There's a nice space where you could add additional spots, and that would be permitted under the easement. And there are possibilities of utilizing Upper Cuomo and of even adding there if you wanted. And if we had good data and understood when the crunches existed on the busiest days, you could consider running shuttles from, for example, Woodstock Elementary or maybe from Upper Cuomo to the town. And so based on this preliminary study, what we feel is that we should keep studying the Mountain View lot because of all the pros that Rebecca talked about. Remember, we're just trying to decide which ones to study more, not which ones to build housing on. And given all the advantages and given that the parking issues might be more manageable than some of us might have imagined beforehand, we think that this parking issue shouldn't stop the consideration of this parcel. So how do we come down as a committee on what is happening here? I think it's important to remind everyone of something Catherine said at the very beginning, which is where we are in this process. And that is that right now we're not choosing to build on any particular lot. We're choosing which particular lot out of 3 to eliminate so that we can study the other 2 more carefully. And after stage 3, we'll have much more information about sort of how many units there would be and what they might look like and how feasible they were to build in terms of the cost. And then the town could have a conversation and would have a conversation about which, if any of the lots they wanted to continue to pursue as a possibility. So right now, what we're trying to think about is which one to eliminate. And it's also important to remember why we're working with Fisher on this. I mean, it's very easy for us as non-experts to say, oh, we like the advantages of this lot or not of that lot. We might think about parking and we might think about neighbors and we might think about other issues. But those are kind of irrelevant issues if the lots really aren't feasible to build on. And so what Fisher has done in this stage 2 is send a pretty clear signal that building affordable housing on this 3-mile site near Stewart's is prohibitively expensive, and that no matter the advantages it might have of fewer neighbors and no more traffic in town and no parking spots lost, it doesn't matter because in some sense, because of this very uneven rocky terrain and the mini wetlands that are spotted around throughout it, it's just not a place where you could ever afford to build affordable housing. So for this reason, our preliminary assessment here is that we should continue having Fisher work on the Xena Highwoods lot and the Mountain View lot, which of course have their own drawbacks, but which are the most feasible of the two that remain, and to continue to get their expertise on how you might develop them before we have the robust conversation in the town about whether that's something we want at all. And so the next steps that we want to think about are how to, I'm waiting for the next slide to come up, how to be better informed this is the start of a consultation process with the community, but we need to develop that consultation process more carefully and then execute it. And Rebecca's going to talk about that in a minute. But we also have to inform ourselves more on the feasibility side of things. In conversations that we've had with Kylord Farmer from the planning department, who's been helping us throughout, and with the people at Fisher Associates, we've been learning that one of the biggest financial impediments to the projects that we're thinking about trying to do are financial, because most of the funding for a lot of affordable housing projects are focused on projects that have a larger scale than what we're imagining. And so what's possible and what's feasible is still a really important question. And so we've been working with Fisher to organize the webinar that Catherine mentioned at the very beginning. And the idea of this webinar is to bring in panelists who are experts on affordable housing and their finance. And so this slide could be updated as of yesterday morning, but right now, Adam Banoski is going to participate. He is the head architect from Fisher that's working on the project. And we have Kevin O'Connor from Rupco, who is chief executive there. And that's one of the biggest, developers of affordable housing in the area. They're the ones that worked on Woodstock Commons. And then we're identifying someone from the state who is an expert on funding from the state and can help us understand what the state will fund. And then we're trying to find one additional developer who has experience with smaller scale projects. And the idea is in January, we will have a webinar where these people will have an opportunity to inform the town about how it works and take questions. It's not going to be a webinar about the specific parcels we're thinking about, but really about the bigger picture questions of finance and feasibility and how to do all of this while you're trying to maintain the town's focus on environmental sustainability. And so we're looking forward to that, and we hope people will come and listen and we all get informed together about these issues. But now let me turn it over to Rebecca, who's going to talk more about community outreach as we go forward.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so the second thing that we want to do before any decisions are made is to hear from you, our community. And to accomplish this, we are planning a couple of things. One is we want to set up some small listening sessions with tailored groups of willing business owners, employees, and community stakeholders. We also plan to host a public community meeting to receive further input. Details of that and when it will happen will come soon, but we're expecting we can host that sometime in the first quarter of next year. And during all of these sessions, we are hoping to hear your questions and concerns overall and discuss potential scenarios for designing housing on each site. In addition, we'd like your help in thinking about a few things, such as how buildings should fit into a specific location, be it in the village hamlet or a rural site. We want to explore how concepts connect with nearby streets and infrastructure to enhance sustainability. We're also going to think about how public spaces can be emphasized in this development and consider planning for future flexibility. And all of this feedback is also going to help inform some of the plans and designs that we'll get back from Fisher in the Stage 3 report. So just to recap our next steps here for everyone. So as mentioned, we'll host an informative webinar open to the public with housing experts on financial and engineering constraints, aiming for January of next year. And then over the next few months, we'll be engaging community input in a variety of ways, including those small listening sessions and the open larger community meeting. Then, with all of that input and feedback, we will make a recommendation to the town board, who will ultimately decide on which 2 parcels to move forward with. We'll then deliver that decision to Fisher, and then they will take that and develop more detailed plans and designs for stage 3. So now, what can you do? You're already in this meeting, maybe you're watching this afterwards. Thank you so much for your engagement already. What else can you do in this process? Well, first, we encourage you to read the stage 2 report. We're going to be posting that on our committee page, where we usually post other things. We'll post this slide deck. This video will also be up and available on our town YouTube page. So please do read that. Now, it can be dense, as mentioned, so we've bundled it with some supplementary resources, some background and appendices to help you better understand the report. It should include everything we've talked about today, such as parking, as well as a very helpful glossary defining some technical terms found in the report. Secondly, if you are a business owner, employee in town, or otherwise a community stakeholder, and you want to be involved in these listening sessions, please do reach out to us. Maybe some of you in this very room fit that bill. Maybe we'll be reaching out to you and asking if you can be involved. We encourage you to email us and let us know if you're willing. We'd love to hear from you and form some small listening sessions. If you are a resident, a neighbor of any of these sites that are in consideration, and you want to be involved in this process, please also reach out. And really, anyone can let us know what questions you have by reaching out to our email at housing@woodstockny.org. You can also come to our meetings that happen every month, and we always have a public be heard at the end of those. And on the topic of public be heard, we are going to transition now to that part of the meeting. And I want to go over just a little bit of how we'll run this so that we can have time for everything, because we want to be conscious of everyone's time today and hear from as many voices as possible. So we are going to ask if you can keep your public comments to 2 minutes. And I think Gregory may be helping us out with a timer just to keep us all on track and aware of the time. At the end of the 2 minutes, we'll kindly ask you to wrap up your thought. And if you have more to say, please do email us with the rest. I think I may start out and go through the chat and see if there were any topics there that we wanted to cover, and if the author of those comments wanted to say anything there. And then we'll go around the room, maybe do a virtual hand raise or an actual hand raise, and we'll call on you and hear from you. One more note, just given the interest of time and hearing everyone, we likely won't be giving very detailed responses to questions tonight, unless we can briefly point you in the right direction of an answer. Our main goal is really just to collect your comments and questions tonight, and we will find ways to report back out more detailed answers in the coming weeks and months. So thank you in advance for your patience on that. All right, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I know we had a few comments about parking on that one. We had someone mention, what about all of the folks illegally parking in front of people's houses in the village? Does anyone want to elaborate on that or talk about that? If not, definitely noted. One thing I
can
think
talk
is,
to it.
oh, sure.
Yeah, hi, this is Howard with Complete Streets. Yeah, to talk about the parking in town, we just tried recently to look at taking some parking spots away on Tinker Street between Tannery Brook Road and the Village Green. And as you probably heard or saw, there was a major pushback, both from residents and from businesses. And some of that noise came from residents living on side streets close to town. And their fear was that there would be increased parking on side streets to a much greater level than what currently exists. And of course, we were only discussing 10 parking spots on that stretch of road. Here you're talking about a lot more. We agree. Complete Streets has been aware that the parking lots are very underutilized, and you've come up with the same findings. And we're very supportive of affordable housing and the needs. So what we've done, and I put in the chat, we have an invoice in front of the town board for approval because we feel that improved signage will allow visitors to find those parking lots. Now, how that would affect the Mountain View parking lot or lots as a whole, but we do think the upper Kamola could possibly be used to a greater extent, particularly by visitors if they felt they could leave their car there for a day and go and shop and eat in town and enjoy themselves. So a few things there. Xena Highwoods would worry me a little bit with the traffic levels on that road. We know what they're up against with the Xena development and already facing an increase in traffic. So just from a traffic point of view, that would be a concern. And then Xena Road down by Route 28, that's an incredibly dangerous junction. So just something to consider, and of course, the location.
Thank you, Howard. And
My
thank you
time's
for-
up.
Thank you. No, very well done. And thank you for representing Complete Streets here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We had another comment about parking, asking about, what about the people who are working in businesses in the village? Where do they park? And also a mention of the Complete Streets working towards closing off Tinker to be more open for pedestrians, but the loss of parking spaces would happen there. So consider that. Any other further thoughts from the author of that comment?
Yeah, hi, this is Urena. I'm actually with Lizzie, because anyway. So my question is, well, having worked on Tinker for 5 years at the wine store as an example, a lot of people who work in the stores there, and folks that will not necessarily be able to be part of affordable housing, this particular project, but they have to drive in from out of town, they work in the stores, they need a place to park, and they do take up a lot of parking because there's very little around. But it's kind of an issue. So as an example, if I came in at 1 o'clock, my 1 o'clock shift on a Saturday, and I had to close the store, and finding a spot on a Saturday at 1 o'clock in the middle of, high season was very difficult. Also, when I leave, I'm closing up a booze and money worth money, it's a little bit scary to close up a shop by myself late at night that has a lot of alcohol and potential cash or whatever, and then have to walk a far distance to it. I kind of, especially in the winter, all times of the year. So there's always been an issue with parking. I just don't think that, and it doesn't seem realistic that you can have 36 units and still have half of that parking for the town and for the people living in the 36 units. We still, remember, live in the country. So people need cars to get to their second, their third job. I had 3 jobs that I had to run out to a school in a district in another town, then come back to this job, then close that job, then go stay at someone's house or move to wherever I was. So I think we need to think about the parking situation first before we're kind of just saying, okay, we're going to take it away. I think it needs to be dealt with. And I know Complete Streets is trying to work on, that taking away parking spots in the middle of town, along with you're going to take away parking spots. And we're in a situation that we need more than what we have right now, not to be taking it away. So that's just one issue, but I know my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorena. Thank you for that. Right.
Can I say something separately? I know
Yes,
on the
you may.
same camera,
That's okay.
but just, I always think about how you pay for things because I always do private development without bringing in funds. So my comment would be if there is a third parcel, the one down at the end of Xena Road, it looks like a nice parcel. Maybe it should be put up for sale by the town, and the money that's raised from that, if the town can't use it for anything else, to fund the development of these two, whatever the end result is. Can I just ask, is it that 2 areas might be developed, or are we just trying to narrow it down to 1 area?
I can answer that. We're thinking there could be 2.
Okay.
There would be a better scale if we had more units, and that might be more inviting to a developer. So,
And also you might then end up with 70 units out of your target 300.
yeah, maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
One more thing, can I just say
Yes.
Quickly, there's a organization come together. I just went to a networking in Kingston a couple weeks ago called the Hudson Valley Regenerative Housing. And there's private builders and architects and people, they're all talking about affordability housing throughout the Hudson Valley. And it was really exciting, but people from all different sectors. And they're also talking about green, renewable energy type housing. So it might be worth you guys bringing them in as a panel members, like connecting with them, and I can help connect you with them to bring in some of those people for the panel.
Okay, thanks, Joanna.
Get frozen
I do
here.
see Laura's hand up. Laura, maybe we can go to you next. We'll go back to the chat and we'll make sure we cover
And
everything.
also Max Resnick wanted
Yes,
to
yeah,
say
I'll get
Yeah.
down, yeah, from.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
More there.
Hey,
Yeah,
thanks.
cover.
Well,
Mhm.
first of all, excellent job, and thank you for the excellent communication. Very, very well done on the communication. So I guess a couple of comments is the one is, I know when you did the study of, well, there's still spots in town, although there are sometimes when people really want to be in the Mountain View and the Rock City Road area, and it may be, they may not really want to be hiking all the way down to Lower Como. It is a bit of a hike. So because, for example, when I go to the farmer's market, there's sometimes no spots in Mountain View, but I maybe can find spots across the street in Rock City. And if you're doing Volunteers Day, to tell somebody, oh, well, your parking is in the Lower Cuomo, it's a bit of a hike from the center of what they're looking to do. So that may work out, it may not work out. I just wanted to comment, but I like your idea. If you could run a shuttle, that would solve a number of problems, including the fact the library is now a mile down the street. So I do love the brainstorming and the shuttle idea. I do, and I think I see Lori. Did I see you and Lori on Lizzie's in Lizzie's Zoom? Maybe it's not Lori, but anyway, I know the Youth Center Task Force. Yay, there she is. The Youth Center Task Force proposal. One of the proposals did have an idea of adding more parking there. So consider if we lose parking in Mountain View, and if we add parking on the Youth Center lot where the community center is. If we could add parking there and then lose it from Mountain View, it wouldn't be a hurtful thing, because that's just a little ways down the street. So coordinating projects is a thought. And the other question I have, if you build in Mountain View, is it possible to plan a building where part of the building, people are living on the second floor because the first floor is actually parking? Because once you get that building, people are going to have a place to park. And I wonder if the structure of the building could be raised so parking could be under it, so you're not stealing quite as many spots. So those are kind of my thoughts for the day. And I appreciate that Laurie's here, and for the town board to know this, hopefully, I'm not sure if they'll review time's up. I'm not sure if they'll review this presentation, but it'd be great to bring them in before, as you say, next steps. They'll have to vote later, but great to bring them in as much as possible now, so they're really ready to vote.
Definitely. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to jump back to the chat. I know we had a few more things. I think we covered Howard's comment from Complete Streets. We did have a question about what funds would be used to build affordable housing.
I mean, maybe we can go along. Yeah, so we can look at those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I can try to answer that one.
Thanks,
this
Kai.
is-
Oh, and I
is
think
the-
some people may not be on mute.
You need to know, yeah.
So generally, it's a wide mix across projects, as Catherine mentioned. There are federal sources; those tend to lean towards bigger projects, but the primary source for folks like Repco and other affordable housing developers is from Homes and Community Renewal, which is the state agency that provides financing and grant funding. The Plus One ADU program runs through them, and then most bigger affordable housing projects. So that's where funding would come from in terms of subsidy, and then there's banks that developers work with, and then we also have the Housing Action Fund. So for any housing project, there's usually 3, 4, 5 sources, but for affordable housing, there can be even more. And it's just part of the work that an affordable housing developer does to close the gap for a project and make it work.
Thank you, Kai. All right. And there was a question about making the presentation available. Yes, we will. And in fact, I thought I might share my screen so everyone can know where we post our documents. So on the town website, if you go to the town website and go to boards and committees and housing committee, this is where we post all of our documentation. So please do check there soon for that. I do believe we also have YouTube links posted here. We have a YouTube channel as well. So this recording will be there, as well as the deck and the Fisher report as well. So I hope you will check that out later and read it and share it. We have a request for a public comment from Maxanne.
Hi, all. Thank you, and thanks to the committee for doing all this hard work over a number of years. A couple of comments. I think first, I guess what I'd like to, I think Howard already mentioned it, but I wanted that the committee and Fisher are well aware of the proposal, the Xena development proposal that is going to be fairly adjacent, land-wise, fairly adjacent to the parcel that you guys are, that the town owns. Currently, that development is proposing 30 single-family homes well into the 625-acre property in the town of Ulster with access through the town of Woodstock. But obviously, that's raising a lot of concerns with the potential volume of that development and its future possibilities. So I think that's important to keep in mind as you're discussing the Xena Highwoods parcel. Secondly, Catherine's, I've discussed this with Catherine. I am volunteering and do feel that it would be helpful to have a survey done. I would be happy to walk the whole town and meet the owners and employees of each of the businesses and just ask them of their own housing needs and what they imagine their housing needs to be in the future. For instance, if they're a young person, you know, will they end up wanting housing? We're assuming they will, and we're making assumptions. And I know, Kai, that planners use certain statistics to figure out, but I think it's worthwhile to take time and maybe have a place right now to question currently what folks are wanting to have. And there was something else I was going to say, but oh, and then obviously I don't know what's going to happen with the school vote, the bond vote, but certainly the vote has been set up that the school is going to be closing, and whether that's the case or not, that's something to put on the sheet for down the road potentially to discuss if, you know, depending on how things go. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Maxanne. All right, we've gotten through the comments in the chat, so we'll open it up to anyone else in the room who wants to say something that hasn't had a chance already. Feel free to use a virtual hand raise or a physical hand raise. So I'll give a moment for people to just speak up if they'd like.
I just put a question in the chat.
I see. Will the housing only be for Woodstock residents? Do we have an answer for that? Kai.
Yeah, so I can, it's a more involved answer, but generally the answer is no, not specifically for Woodstock residents. But there are ways to kind of prioritize community members for when that housing does become available. But you cannot exclude someone outside of the town of Woodstock who would maybe like to live in the town of Woodstock from this housing. There's an important, you know, I grew up in Woodstock, very close to Woodstock. So it's important to make sure that people can stay generation after generation. So, but in terms of fair housing law, especially less diverse communities, you need to make sure that you're not being discriminatory towards populations who may not have the ability or income to live in Woodstock, but would like to. And so I know a lot of people, you know, live in Woodstock, but maybe weren't born there or grew up there. So there's always a mix of people coming and going in communities. But the short answer is to protect against fair housing law. You need to open up those opportunities to anyone, but there's ways to prioritize local workforce, firefighters, emergency management or emergency services personnel, and some other elderly folks with disabilities. Those are all folks who can get prioritized for the housing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could also add to that, when Woodstock Commons was going in, I had a worry because same thing was said, it has to be opened up to everybody. And I had a worry it wasn't really helping Woodstockers. And the reality is, in my opinion, from people I know, is the Woodstockers were the ones that most wanted to live there. And it wound up being a lot of Woodstockers because they got themselves on the list. And even if they had to wait 5 years, they still got in there. So it turned out to be that's where Woodstockers wanted to live. And they wound up being a lot of people who applied, and it wound up being a lot of Woodstockers did get a home there.
And that's what we hear from affordable housing developers in our area in the Hudson Valley, that there isn't this kind of perceived demand from the outside that would take it all up, but that a lot of times it ends up being majority folks from the community or nearby, or folks coming back from being displaced or living somewhere else.
Thank you, Laura. Any other takers, comments, or questions? All right. I think we've held silence for long enough. Can I pass it back to you, Catherine?
Yes, thank you everyone for coming tonight. And as we've mentioned, this recording will be on the town website and the presentation will be on the town website as long with the reports. So, and feel free to email us with any questions. And thanks again for coming. Have a good night.
Catherine, can I just say one
Yeah.
thing?
Sure.
I just was really glad of everyone's interventions tonight. I think that this project is never going to work unless we have these conversations, and to have, substantive suggestions engaging the project was really helpful to us. And we hope you guys can figure out how to expand the community that is engaging with us about this, because it's never going to work if we can't figure out the problems and solutions before we get to the end.
Yes. All righty. I'm going to end the meeting. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.